Greetings, fellow Ambazonians. I am Derek Yu, the CEO of SABC. After the unfounded accusations by Mr. Chris Anu that I am the one who leaked the audio in which he is heard plotting the destruction of SABC to set up a personal TV station like his radio station, I have decided enough is enough and time to respond back directly. It has become a trend that each time Chris Anu is caught betraying the struggle, he has the tendency to blame someone else. That ends today. On Thursday, the 19th of July, the SABC board was forwarded a 5 minutes 44 seconds audio which was shared in the communications forum by Undersecretary of Communications Emma Larry Daniels, followed by 4 derogatory comments by Comrade Paddy, the head of audiovisual units of communications, on the character of board members. With no surprise to me, as it's becoming clear now that the audio and comments were deleted almost the same time. Any honest person in the Department of Communications can testify if he or she goes back to Thursday, the 19 chats on the forum, it would reflect that Undersecretary deleted her entry of 18:48 p.m., followed by Comrade Paddy, who deleted his entries of 18:52 p.m., 18:54 p.m., 18:55 p.m., and 18:55 p.m. respectively. The content of the audio stated clearly Secretary Chris presented he has completed plans of setting up a new TV station for the IG called ABC. He advised the acting president that SABC bills should not be paid, and he further puts the launch date for the second week of August, before which he will come live on SABC and tell Ambazonians SABC board has refused to hand over SABC contract to the IG, and IG has moved on to create a new station. The board met after receiving this information and concluded that it will have an engagement with cabinet to find out what is going on and the way forward. I will explain more on what is now seen as cabinet versus SABC board fight and who is fueling it as we continue. I shared the audio with Chief of Staff of the Department of Communications, Dr. Luis. We chatted a bit that evening. The next day in the morning, he WhatsApped me and said, Secretary Chris has said I tapped into their meeting. And he was asking me, why will I be blackmailing Secretary Chris? Now, was what Secretary Chris saying wrong? Why would you say, was it wrong for public to know? And if it was wrong, tell me, why would the Undersecretary of Communications record such and also share it in a public forum? Well, that is really their problem. But if I did that, it would be very easy, because with the meeting ID, we can easily contact the service provider and get details of who attended the said meeting. With that, I told him from that moment on, I will stop letting the Department of Communications use my paid account for their meetings, because the accusation was simply lack of gratitude from their part, where I'm paying for a service and they have been using it over the last 7 months for free, and my thank you now is silly accusations. As if that's not enough, his accusation was followed by a Facebook post by Secretary Chris on same Friday at 10 p.m. It reads, remain calm about the audio. I meant every word in it. Our meeting was hacked. We'll be back with the full story. The devil is in trouble. I reported this to the SABC board and also to our country coordinator and said, I'm amused by this framing. Same evening, after country coordinator's meeting, our country coordinator called me to say Secretary Chris made the same claim that I hacked their meeting and recorded the audio at the meeting. That evening, he asked Secretary Chris 2 times if he was certain about this accusation, just so that we can push it off. And Secretary Chris doubled down that he is certain and won't take back his words. Well, as I explained in the opening, for whatever reason, the audio was recorded and shared by the Undersecretary for Communications, and there is screenshot evidence of it. Immediately after that audio went out, Another one, Stephen Niba, with the handle Steve Nilbok, cut out a segment of an interview I did with Comrade Milan last year, at the end of which is claiming that Milan is claiming ownership of SABC. This is real nonsense, because in that interview, if you watch it to the end, you would hear out of sarcasm, because detractors were claiming that Milan owned SABC. He said, for someone who owns SABC, how come he has only appeared on SABC 2 times? Let me set the record straight on some of the things Secretary Chris is propagating about SABC that are not true. First, Secretary Chris, even in that audio, said the reason for a new TV station is because the SABC board is withholding the SABC contract from cabinet. This is not true. After Sisiku, who instructed this document remained classified to hide the service provider details from the enemy, was abducted in Nigeria. That month end, we sent the SABC bill and it was not paid, which led to the first suspension because Secretary Chris insisted the original invoices must be given to him. And we objected, stating the reasons why Sisiku classified them. After insisting the documents be sent before payment, we resolved that we will send them to Barrister Bobga Harmony as head of the council leading at the time. And payment was made after we sent them. Come end of month, we had a new regime in place. A crisis meeting was held with members of cabinet and members of the board to discuss and ensure the saga never repeats itself again. Before the meeting, we sent the contract to the acting president, Sako, and he acknowledged this during the meeting. In the meeting, it was decided that as a way forward, every month end, we should send all the original invoices to the office of the acting president with the email address he has provided, and one invoice be made in the SABC letterhead with all the amounts reflecting on it. And Secretary Chris will authorize payment as per the supply chain management set up in place. This went on smoothly as we followed the process from March through April, and again end of June. On the 1st of July, Secretary Chris was contacted to authorize payment, and he again requested that to be sent the contract. Held back payment until we got suspended again for the second time before payment was made. After the audio went out, the Chief of Staff, Professor Martin Ayim, sent the chairman of the board a letter requesting the contract to be sent to his email. It baffles me why the Chief of Staff, if he needs the contract, not just request the AP, who is his boss and has the contract, to hand it over to him. But we already know now that it's for Prof. Ayim and Chris Ano to claim tomorrow to Ambazonians, quoting the request from the board and the refusal to send the contract. No, Prof. Ayim, the procedure agreed was simple, that the contract be sent to the AP, which has been sent, and all original invoices be sent to the AP every month, and one full invoice from SABC be sent to Secretary of Communications and Secretary of Finance. Secretary of Comms will sign and approve, and Secretary of Finance will make payment. So go to the AP and ask for the contract if you need it, sir. And at his discretion, he will choose to give you or not. Don't come to the board, because that is a plan that you people are trying to plot. To conclude on this point, we, the board, voted a Secretary General when the board was created. We handed over these documents, and in a meeting, the Secretary General showed them to all board members, so everyone can tell their communities with certainty that they have seen them. When the board elected a chairman, the documents again were shared with the chairman as well. And these talks of South Africa hiding the contract because Milan owns SABC is not only misleading the Ambazonian people, but also a bad intention, as you can see now from the patterns. That when someone wants to bring down something, he or she just needs to put out a story and add Milan's name to it. For the record, Milan, who was instrumental in negotiating we get the license in the first place, is not a signatory to the SABC contract and has never received a copy of that document. In the last crisis meeting, the chairman of the board showed the documents from his screens, after which, on his next outing, Secretary Chris Ano stated to Ambazonians that SABC has no relationship with Comrade Milan as well. Now tell me, if Secretary Chris would have said such from an uninformed position. Secondly, Secretary Chris Ano reportedly made misleading statements at the cabinet, also at the Restoration Council and at the country coordinators meeting, that the board wants to privatize SABC because they are greedy and want to make money out of it at the detriment of Ambazonian people. Maybe you don't understand this, Secretary Chris. Let me explain to you how SABC project to sell shares to Ambazonian was born. Last year, when you and your cohorts were all over social media that there was misappropriation of funds at SABC, we sent a report to the third conclave recommending that every community, every Ambazonian community around the world constituted and supporting the struggle should send a member to represent them at the board, so that the community can be informed by a member of their community how SABC is run. Ambazonians started calling on SABC to find a self-sustaining model. I went to represent SABC at the fourth conclave, and I presented the board's vision on how SABC can become self-sustaining. And it was simple, that instead of just asking for Ambazonians to donate towards SABC like donating for everything else, a percentage of SABC instead be made available to Ambazonians so they can invest in SABC through buying and owning of SABC shares by themselves, so that SABC can become an Ambazonian company funded to go international by Ambazonians, so that we can all be proud of it. The prospectus was presented in the meeting to cabinet members instructed to attend by the acting president, after which the board met with the acting president and he said he will make a decision in 2 weeks, after which he instructed the board chairman that he would prefer that the board presented the prospectus to the Restoration Council for them to decide. The instructions were followed and the presentation was made to the Restoration Council. They voted it was good and a sustainable model and gave SABC a go-ahead, which the board decided to wait until my trip to Buea ended. Now, you sound privatization of SABC as if SABC is being sold to the enemy or some capitalist. Thirdly, another claim you have been making, that SABC is broadcasting divisive message. I want to set the record straight that the board drafted an editorial policy and sent your department to input. Until this day, there hasn't been any response. The editorial policy, to be clear, hinges on one thing, that all Ambazonian frontline leaders and activists have access to using SABC as well, but all must sign a memorandum of understanding that we all will only use SABC to promote the struggle, and no one will use SABC to verbally attack others, incite hate or violence amongst Ambazonians. What you really are not saying, Secretary Chris, is that the day the cabinet saw a poster of me to interview Comrade Ebenezer Akwanga, calls were made to halt the program, which I said it was uncalled for to be refusing a veteran in the struggle the platform. And immediately after that show, the resolutions of cabinet, for the first time I saw cabinet resolutions floating on social media, and cabinet voted to restructure the board and management of SABC, and also that the cabinet will no longer permit the process of selling SABC shares to Ambazonian. I'm yet to see one argument, Secretary Chris, from you or your surrogates that makes sense to why Ambazonians should, in the process of professionalizing SABC, see our treasury start spending more than double on SABC instead of focusing on ground zero. since there's an investment option which will enable SCBC raise its own capital while cabinet focus on its mandate, which is to get us to Buea as fast as possible. To run SCBC professionally, we have presented what will make SCBC to become a powerhouse in media, with studios around the world will be costing about $30,000 a month. I'm baffled that cabinet is willing to pay that amount just to control 100% of SCBC. The question we should be asking is, why are they willing to spend that much when an option for SCBC to self-fund is on the table, giving cabinet the latitude to spend all its resources on ground zero? Something is really wrong here. Chris Anu and Mola Wunja are peddling another rumor that Mangang was paid twice. If not of Mangang, there will be no SCBC. Let me be very clear. Now, this is very simple. Mola Wunja was a board member of Scapac and should have the record of this payment. Let me state here that if Mola Wunja can present the proof that Scapac repaid the loan, I will first step aside completely from SCBC before tabling my apology letter to him and publicly to Ambazonians. However, if he cannot show such proof of an allegation which he used to cloud members of Restoration Council's judgment, he should honorably step down as a member of the Restoration Council, because he won't be worthy to serve Ambazonians for lack of integrity. Lastly, the other trump card Secretary Chris is using, that in the process to sell shares, the management team will have a percentage equity of SCBC. Now, this makes me laugh. My team has set up and run SCBC for free for the last 14 months. You say you are creating a channel because it would have coverage for the whole of Africa. Don't you know that at no cost to the interim government or to the Ambazonian people, my team built SCBC Roku and SCBC Amazon apps. These enable people to watch SCBC from the comfort of their television sets from anywhere in the world. What coverage are you talking about? Again, my team built and made available a model for SCBC Android and web, which enables people to watch SCBC on the go from their phones. We just completed SCBC Apple version now. All this is done at no cost, and you say it's wrong for us to want equity, that we would put in our skills to build SCBC to become a $10 million company by year 10. Are you kidding me? A lot is going on. Let me end with these points. We could have privatized SCBC from inception and dedicated a small percentage to the struggle. Instead, we gave it to Southern Cameroonians and have provided the expertise to run it up to this day free of charge. While Milan was traveling the world, soliciting support and asking people to invest on SCBC, you, Chris Anu, was doing divisive audios on social media. For over 1 year, our small team have been sacrificing and putting at least 50% of our time daily to serve the people of Ambazonia and not being appreciated by people like you. If you, Chris Anu, are truly a patriot like we are, why did you not set up the radio station and hand it over to Ambazonians? Instead, clearly now, you have profited from the position given to you and opened a radio station. First of all, hand over that radio station to Southern Cameroonians before you can even raise a voice and talk about SCBC. By the way, where is the Ambazonian radio station you announced that has been created? Oh, that has failed, right? And you succeeded in creating your own. Well done. That is patriotism. Clearly, I'm seeing it. It's the people who infiltrated the struggle that are being used to kill SCBC. Reasons why the original bills are only sent to the president. Is Chris Anu the president? Why is he always asking for the... Why does he want the contract? Instead of addressing the issues from your audio, you are accusing me of hacking the system, which I clearly explained in this video that was recorded by your undersecretary. I have news for you. All those people plotting to kill SCBC, go ahead. Open your station. Just make sure it works, but don't come back to us when it fails. If you take that step within a month, call on Ambazonians who believe in SABC to invest in it, and we will be great competitors. So, see you at the other side. This nonsense must stop. Those in leadership must be accountable to the people. People reserve the right to ask questions to their government, and it's the duty of those who hold office to answer those questions. Right of debate is a must for Ambazonians. We don't want to end up with rebels in the bush because some were refused the right to speak and debate on issues when they came up. No to another form of democracy avancée in Ambazonia in the name of revolutionary democracy. We must all have rules that apply to everybody, and when one fails those rules, he or she should humbly step aside. Thank you.